Hi there, my name is Gregory Melchor-Barz. I'm the faculty head of North House, the reigning Commons Cup champion in the Ingram Commons. Today I'd like to take you for a little ramble from the Ingram Commons over to main campus and talk about some ideas that occurred to me as I was reading Andrew Delbanco's College, What It Was, Is, and Should Be. I'm holding a book and a coffee mug, which are the typical things you'll find in the hands of a professor. My coffee mug happens to have the symbol of my college, my alma mater, Brown University, which is also called the Vanderbilt of Rhode Island. So come on. Okay, so I have 9 brief points to make. The first is a phrase used by Delbanco in the final chapter of his book, Chapter 6, What Is to Be Done. And he uses the phrase community of learning. And I thought about that, and I was thinking about our own community here, our community of learning. Now, if you look over here, we have the Commons Center, which is often just referred to as the dining center. But the Commons Center is much more than a dining center. It is much more than a building. It's a place where students come together and protect and foster their ways of learning as a community. And that reminded me of when I was a young professor at my first job at Ohio State. Go Buckeyes, up the road. And I found myself in a very large male restroom at the School of Music. And I remember minding my own business as men are supposed to do in restrooms, as I counted the 39 urinals that surrounded me in this very large public restroom. And I remember at one point, again, minding my own business, hearing one gentleman at a urinal far from me start humming the Ohio State fight song. Within seconds, 39 urinals were all humming along, singing, eventually crying at the sound of the chorus that was emerging from the men's bathroom. A community of learning is not just the architecture, it's not just the buildings, it's what helps foster our learning and allows us to be a community within which we learn. That's kind of cool. My second point is kind of a humorous one in this final chapter. It's about grade inflation. According to Delbanco, I quote, "Except in the hard sciences, grades mean less and less, especially in elite colleges where the numbers of students graduating with honors and with GPAs over 4.0 has become outlandish." I find this humorous to talk about grade inflation at a top 20 university. Why do we spend time thinking about this when we recruit smarter and smarter students? Why wouldn't we expect that our grades are going to go higher and higher? So when somebody asks me about grade inflation, here we are standing in front of Peabody College of Education, the number one ranked school of education in the country, and I'm thinking, if my students are getting smarter and smarter, and we are letting in students of higher and higher caliber, why shouldn't I be expected to raise my grades to reflect the quality of my students? Why, for example, if my syllabus outlines what it takes to achieve an A in a class and my students are getting smarter and smarter and they achieve that A, why am I not allowed to give that A? It's something that we all take the time to reflect on. And I do find it humorous that we spend time and pages and ink talking about grade inflation. According to Delbanco, attendance is a very odd thing when you consider where learning takes place. Does learning take place in the classroom? Does it take place in the library? Does it take place in the dorm room? I firmly believe that, as a professor, I firmly believe that the art of the lecture is not dead. Do I care if students come to class? Well, of course I care. I feel that a lot of learning takes place in the classroom, in the context within which the interaction between the professor and the student exists. Now, we have various modalities these days, online, digital, Coursera. We're exploring many different modalities. But I will go on record as saying the art of the lecture is not dead, that one can actually learn in the moment in which there is an exchange of ideas, where there is give and take, where there are small group discussions. So in talking about attendance, I don't think clicking your name, putting a check next to your name is the mark of attendance. I think the mark of attendance is being fully present, being aware, being curious, and it's more than just showing up. My fourth point is about new modalities for learning and teaching. According to Delbanco, an exuberant vision of the future has recently been offered by Kathy Davidson, who believes that for young people accustomed to rapid-fire switching from texting to surfing to blogging, multitasking is not a cause or symptom of distraction, but an ideal mode of learning. In this vision, the classroom becomes a fluid and porous place. Indeed, hardly a place at all in which authority for grading and even for defining the subject of study is shared by teacher and students. I find this fascinating as we, the older people, the older faculty, find ourselves in a privileged place of learning how to evaluate, how to assess, how best to integrate technology and learn from our students, the younger members of this modality, this shared modality. Here we are crossing 21st Avenue, the main thoroughfare that divides Vanderbilt University, and we're on the bridge that actually connects the two parts of the university, the Commons and Peabody College. Fifth point that Delbanco makes is about developing a caring model for faculty and student interaction. He says if good things are to happen to students, faculty must care. Not only because this is the basic precondition of good teaching, but because with a few minor exceptions, such as teaching awards or occasionally supplementary pay for teaching certain required courses, the preferred rewards of academic life have nothing to do with demonstrated concern for students. In many academic institutions, teaching is its own reward. Therefore, one obvious thing to do is to try to produce more teachers who care about teaching. At Vanderbilt, in the Commons, we have 10 professors who care deeply about their roles as teachers, as professors, as people who spend their lives, their talent, their time in the classroom with students. I absolutely agree with Delbanco. The incentives for great teaching don't always produce a model for caring about the learning, caring about the outcomes, caring about the deliverables, caring about the modality between students and faculty. So that's something I suspect the Commons is getting right by having faculty live and learn with their student communities. Absolutely. We're standing in front of the Tree of Knowledge, a sculpture in front of the university's central library. And it reminds me of a very important point Delbanco makes in his final chapter, and that college teaching is, in his words, a delicate and difficult art. And we have to remind ourselves why we're in college, why we're here, and why we value living in the world of ideas. The life of the mind, the life of silence, Delbanco calls it. Living, enveloping ourselves, luxuriating ourselves within books, ideas, culture, music, the arts, the tree of knowledge, allowing ourselves to just languish in this and then stop and take stock and not expect that all knowledge just comes directly to us, but it may come later on. It's a valuable lesson, and Delbanco says it puts pressure on students to learn in very different ways in which they are not, in his words, badgered or bullied, but allowed to experience life in learning. According to Delbanco, perhaps the most daunting challenge facing those of us who believe in the universal value of liberal education is the challenge of conveying its value to anyone who has not personally experienced it. And I'm reminded of a recent dialogue I entered into on Facebook, because I am on Facebook with many of my students interacting, and one of my students, I'm sorry to out him, quoted a very famous theorist who used big fancy words, and the student quipped rather innocently, and he questioned, do I have to be a PhD in order to understand what this author was saying? And he said, what the heck does autochthonous mean? And I should not have responded. Absolutely not. Instead, I started typing and said, autochthonous is a beautiful term. It means, literally it means to come from a community, local. So I responded, this is a beautiful word that most graduates of a top 20 research university would know, and that I never learned this myself in a PhD program. I just expect myself to know such language. This produced a barrage of responses from students on Facebook, both pro and con, saying, yes, language is all we have. One student said, language is all we have. It's what separates us from the baboons. Finally, this student stepped back and said, maybe it's not about getting the PhD. Maybe it is. We should expect ourselves to stretch ourselves, to value pushing ourselves, as Delbanco says. I personally believe that my education didn't happen within the institution. It happened within myself. I educated myself. I needed to push myself. A daunting challenge, Delbanco says. I'm standing in front of Kirkland Hall in the background, the oldest building on campus, and home to many of the administrators who help run this fine university with passion. And I'm thinking about why I'm here at this university, and it has everything to do with what Delbanco calls big questions. I quote, having observed and participated in classes at a wide range of colleges with students at all levels of preparation and sophistication, it's been my experience, Delbanco's experience, that whether they are studying accounting or philosophy, hotel management or history, the vast majority of college students are capable of engaging the kinds of big questions of truth, responsibility, justice, beauty, that were once assumed to be the center of college education. And I've got to agree, big questions, approaching big questions, having the guts to ask big questions is at the heart of why I'm teaching at Vanderbilt. My ninth and final point takes place in Surratt Cinema, which is in the center of campus. It's in the Surratt Student Center, and it is my intellectual home, my academic home. This is where I teach my classes. So typically, we'll have anywhere from 75 to 200 students in this classroom. I teach classes at 8 in the morning, and students are expected to embrace this space as their intellectual home. My final point is about a term Delbanco uses in the very final sentence of his book. He uses the term haven. A college should not be a haven from worldly contention, but a place where young people fight out among and within themselves, contending ideas of the meaningful life, and where they discover that self-interest need not be at odds with concern for one another. We owe it to posterity to preserve and protect this institution. Democracy depends on it, end quote. A haven for me, a classroom for me, is not a place to escape within my own ideas and then propagate my own feelings, my own ideas, my own conceptualizations. It's not a place to escape to, but a place to nurture ideas. It's a place to be comfortable being uncomfortable within the greater world of ideas. This may look like an empty space, and it really is, until you guys show up next year and start filling these empty spaces, not just with your bodies, not just with your backpacks, not just with your books, but your ideas, your brains, to help make this not a haven, not a place to escape to, but as Delbanco says, a place where we can fight out among each other and with ourselves about what life is all about. Thank you very much, and I look forward to seeing you in just a few weeks.